You can have a seat, and I just want to say real quick, thank you for being here. I know you all have busy schedules in July, and it's an honor that you're here. And if I have not met you yet, I saw a few of you sneak in. Not that I was watching the clock, but I saw you sneak in a little late this morning. I would love to meet you before you leave here today and get to know you and hear your story. So please find me after the service. But friends, last night as I'm watching the news, and many of you were sending me news bites, and just to see the division in this country, my heart, yes, it goes to the church. Well, how are we being unified? Are we being a force that's unstoppable in what we believe about the gospel, the good news of Jesus? But a question kept coming to my mind, looking at the passage that we're going to go into today in the Bible, but also just in life and watching this event and all the news stories, trying to figure out what happened. And I was just thinking, just one question. If I could ask somebody, anybody, one question, if I knew I had 1 minute left on earth, and if I could only ask a question, the question would be this. I would want to look at your eyes. This is for our friends online tuning in as well. I would want to ask you, do you have a personal relationship with Jesus? And what I mean by that is, no, I'm not saying, do you know some Bible verses? I'm not saying, do you know some church history? I'm not asking, have you served in the church before? I'm asking, do you have a personal, living and breathing relationship with the creator of everything? And his name is Jesus Christ. Because that's all that matters. And I know there's turmoil. We're going to have even more tension in the church and society as we get into this election season. But I ask that question because I want you to really think about yourself when I ask that question. I remember years ago sitting on a scholarship board for students, and we had high school students that were applying for scholarships in Oregon. It was so great to have Tiffany here. I could speak Oregonian with Tiffany this morning, talking Tracktown and Nike, all those fun things. But going back in those days, sitting in this with these, they had the interview with the seniors, graduating seniors. And they're always shaking because there's like 6 or 7 of us on this board, and we just look scary for some reason. It's kind of fun. It's kind of weird. But to see them shaking as they come in, they have that interview. We just want to know, well, what are your plans? You know, did you serve in the church? You know, if I don't know who you are, probably not getting a scholarship. You know, I'm the youth pastor. But talking this with this one student, her name doesn't matter, but she might be tuning in. But I remember looking at her eyes as we asked her questions about the Christian faith. And she looked at us, and I could just sense in her heart she was just regurgitating things she's heard over the years. And maybe you've sensed that from people when you hear their faith story, and you just maybe feel like you're being fed lines, or they're just saying that maybe what you want to hear to try to make you feel that they're in with the Christian walk, but you just sense something in your spirit. Is he really personal to you? I remember looking at her in the scholarship interview, she's saying all the right answers. But later in the hallway, I went out, put my arm around her shoulder, and I just said, is that real for you? Is he real for you? I remember seeing this tear in the corner of her eyes. And I don't know, after that, we didn't have a chance to connect. She went off in life and graduated. I hope today that she's been able to think about that. But the whole premise of this series we're in, I think, comes back to that question. Do you have a personal relationship with Jesus? And we see it in the text in the life of David. And if you're new with us this morning, we're going through a series called With God. And it's this concept of just reminding us in our battles that we face, and mainly our battles, hopefully, that are against sin, to realize that God is with us and he is for us if you're a born-again believer in Jesus. But that question, I think we all need to ask ourselves. We all have to ponder that. It's better to think of it now before you go into eternity. Last week, a couple here, a family leaving this parking lot, massive car accident. Some of you saw the backup. Things can happen so quick. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. So you have to think about this in your own life. Do you have a personal relationship with him? And last week, just kind of as a recap where we were in this story. So Israel's trying to find a representative. Who is going to go and battle this Philistine, Goliath? Many of you know this story. And here's this squeaky voice guy named David. He had this anointing, but he still was squeaking. Oh, he's like, I want to go. Okay, we're going to send this guy. They finally had this big speech. He brought receipts, had his resume. And so Saul and company are like, okay, we're going to send you, but we're going to cover you in what we know in the natural with the armor. And so Saul, who's known to be very tall, put his armor on young David. And David is clunking around thinking, I don't know how this is going to work, dragging his chainmail. he says, I can't go in this because it's not tested. He didn't have a chance to actually wear this armor. And the message last week was really just focusing on trying to not have us look at other ministry leaders. I don't want you to speak like me. I don't want you to dress like me. Anyone on the stage, God has given you specific spiritual gifts and behavioral tendencies to use that are unique. And remember, your idea for evangelism might be different than my idea for evangelism. Your methodology, all these things might be different. Your path, your process might be different. But it's the key principle of the Christian faith is what matters. And so David said, forget all this stuff. I'm going to go back to what's familiar with me. Give me a staff, a stick that he had. Give me a sling. So David the shepherd, for so long, he was familiar with these things. They were very, very tested. And so now that's where we left off in the story. He was saying all these things against Goliath, this little guy facing. Now they're in the valley, hillside, both sides knowing whoever wins between this duel right here is going to be the champion side. So can you imagine the anxiety of the Israelites shaking in this moment, thinking we're sending a peon to represent us against this beast. This is so unfair. But we talked about this last week. Yes, it was a very unfair fight. Because if you know the God of the Bible, it was an unfair fight. Because Goliath did not have the God of the Bible on his side, and little David did. So naturally, in the natural world, this doesn't make sense. Goliath, David. But in the supernatural, it was not an equal fight. And so that's where we left off in this story. And so we finished the service last week just talking about what is our principle, what do we believe. We walked through the Apostles' Creed, full of rich church doctrine of the Christian faith. This is what we camp on as a church. This is what we believe in when it comes to Christianity. And we recited that leaving all together. And it was beautiful. We hope to do that at least once a month here as a congregation. And so now, David said all these things against Goliath. So here's the setup, and you know where the story is going, so I want to invite you to turn there. This will also be on the screen this morning. But 1 Samuel chapter 17, this is the last message in the series. The next 3 weeks are very unique in our church. I'm sure you heard from Dr. Sam about where we're going as a church, but this is the last one that we're going to end on, and it's the story of David continues, and my goodness, this guy did not have a sinless life, if you know the story of David. But camping in where he is now, we can glean and learn so much information, but it says this in verse 48. When the Philistine, so Goliath, arose and came and drew near to meet David. So David said all these things, and then Goliath, his adrenaline, testosterone was pumping. He's, don't say another word. So Goliath is now going forward because it's on. You just said all this stuff, and David's saying, but the Lord of hosts is on my side. Said all these things. You defied the name of the Lord, and this whole idea of protecting the name of the Lord. And so now there's this motion, and so Goliath steps forward. David, in response, he didn't hide. He didn't call mom. What did David do? He ran forward as well. So they're going forward. David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistines. So he ran quickly. So the battle is beginning to take form. And friends, if you've been a Christian for a long time, this might be this weird dichotomy, this wrestle. There's this division of thought here, is who is fighting our battles? Because we sing songs where, God, you're victorious, you're fighting my battles, but then I have my personal responsibility. I'm supposed to fight my battles. Well, I don't know about you. Sometimes I'm like, well, who is fighting the battle? What is my role? Maybe I'm the only one that thinks about these things in the room. But I'm looking at this, and I'm like, well, David is doing it, but God is already, there's victory in Jesus. We sing these songs so often. So who is it? Is God fighting our battles? Is he the one doing all the work? Is he fighting and having victory? Or am I fighting the battles? So this is the answer. Yes. Do you want chicken or fish? Yes, right? Wives love this, you know? So yes. So it's the concept of this whole message, this series, is this idea of with God. So yes, God is there, but there's something about his nature in the Trinity. You see this love for relationship and this love for interaction with people. And loving his idea to just wants to know us as his created work, as his art. And so to think, okay, yes, God is fighting the battles, but it takes a partnership. It doesn't need us, but he wants us to be in this partnership with him in these battles. You remember the story about the guy who was stranded on a mountain? I've told this a few months ago. This concept, it's an old fable story, but it kind of, the idea, the principle is a great idea. There's a man who's stranded on a mountain and he can't get down. Maybe he's injured, fill in the blank, whatever you want. But he's up there, he's like, God, please rescue me. Send someone to rescue me. And about 2 minutes later, he hears Here's the thud of the helicopter coming up the hill, and the National Guard, they lower down this ladder, and he has this opportunity. He's screaming at the pilot, "No, it's all good because God's going to rescue me." And then 30 minutes later, these sled dogs come up over the hill, and there's a sled, and the rescue team shows up. He's like, "No, you guys go on because God's going to rescue me." So it requires a little bit of a partnership with us, right? So maybe you've heard the phrase before, the frozen chosen. This concept of, those who are born again, those who are chosen, we're saved by God's grace. And then, it's like, well, God's got it from here. We believe in his grace. It's not a work for us for salvation. But when it comes to Christian living, sometimes we kick back, we open the bag of Doritos, we're like, "God, you've got it." Right? So now we see this image of this partnership. So work hard in the Christian faith. It's not going to save you. It should stem out of your relationship, your personal relationship with Jesus, is to do good works and to serve in the church and to serve like how Jesus served. So God has the battle, but then David is coming alongside with God in unison fighting this together. So now David is running forward at this beast. And there's a lot of speculation this time. Well, maybe Goliath was so ticked off, his anger was raging, he was boiling. Maybe he forgot to put his helmet on. Maybe it was on, he didn't have the right flap down or something because he was just like enraged, or he ran so fast, the flap went up. There's so many different theories about what takes place in the next 20 seconds in the story. But there's a lot here. So now, yes, we're supposed to partner with God. We go with him. And so it says this in verse 49, "And David put his hand," this is familiar to him, rewinding all the way back to all those times with the sheep, the stinky sheep. Remember those times back in the pool? Some of you have been swimming in the pool. We had that message a few weeks ago, God using you in the pool. Remember that one? So now he puts his hand back in his bag. He took out a stone, and he slung it, and it struck the Philistine on his forehead. A direct shot on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. Friends, boys love this story. I don't know, guys, if you grew up with this is a story. I was reading this morning to our girls, or maybe it was yesterday, I don't know, when I read it to our girls. But they looked down, they're like, "Oh, wow, that happened? Okay, yeah." But you read this to boys, it's just like, whoa, this is so intense. Like it went in, like there's detail in the story. It actually sank into the forehead. So crushing the skull right here, going through that. So smashing into the brain. Not just some minor injury, like a little bump and, there's some sort of thing that happened, he had a stroke, he just died. No, this is a morbid, violent clash. Something that was familiar with David. It sank into his forehead, and he fell this way on his face into the ground. Now imagine watching this on the hillsides. Philistines over here. Just full of confidence, pride. We've got this. Look at this peon out here. No armor. Are you kidding me? No armor. A staff going like this with a thing. We have Goliath over here. UFC superstar. Outweighs him by about 400 pounds. So again, looking in the natural. Now imagine this, the Philistine reaction over here, but also the Israelite reaction. Friends, I've been to many sporting events in my life. Maybe you've been to more than I have, I'm sure. I've heard that football is kind of a big deal here down in the South, but I've been to some sporting events where you just want to rip your shirt when you see something absolutely amazing. I remember years ago when they had the Olympic trials in Eugene. It was 2008, I believe. The 800-meter race. I was not there, but I remember hearing the stories. It was 3 University of Oregon students, the first 3 to cross the line go to the Olympics. And it happened to be 3 University of Oregon students on that campus that flew through the line first. I guess the stadium was so out of control. Neighboring restaurants, remember their dishes clanging and banging and falling off of shelves. You've probably been to a sporting event where you saw something that just makes your blood and your goosebumps go crazy. Imagine this as an Israelite. Looking down, they're probably a little bit insecure, like, "David, really?" Getting ready to retreat. Okay, the bush is clear because I'm going to run first this way because Philistines are coming this way quick. Where's my exit route? Maybe taking a couple of steps as you watch him. You're just getting your exit path figured out. So imagine this. But now David, he did what he knew because he rewind back, even years ago, we see in the book of Judges, chapter 20, it talks about the skill that these shepherds had and all the practice day after day after day, defending the sheep. Practice. In Judges 20, it says this. There were 700 chosen men left-handed. Everyone could sling stones at a hair's breadth and not miss. So a hair's width, you could say. So to hit a target from so far away with such accuracy, to split a hair. So to look at a forehead that's probably the size of David's entire head, if not bigger, looking at this thinking, well, this probably wasn't that hard for David. It wasn't that hard because the rest of the world, and I would say most of the Israelites, they look at Goliath, they're like, oh, man, this guy, he's so big, I can't beat him. And David's like, he's so big, I can't miss him. It's your perspective, right? So David, full of the Spirit, moving forward, and this is personal for him, charging forward, does this. I mean, one shot, had backup 4 in his bag, ready to go. Didn't even need him in this moment. One shot. And so our perspective helps think about this. So then in verse 50, so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and he struck the Philistine and he killed him. There was no sword in the hand of David. No sword. He went swordless into this battle. Then David ran again and stood over the Philistine. Imagine the stench from this guy already. Standing over him, all that the fumes now are permeating up into your nostrils, all the BO of the mass of this guy. Standing over the Philistine, he took his sword. He took his sword. This is important. He took Goliath's sword. Imagine how big this thing was. He took his sword, he drew it out of its sheath, and he killed him. And just to get more morbid for you boys, Andrew, this is for you this morning, and he cut off his head with it. Okay, graphic detail. If the Bible is a movie, rated X, friends. Welcome to the story, right? We just know this. He cut off his head with his own sword. He took his own weapon and he cut off his head. When the Philistines saw that the champion was dead, they fled. I can imagine. Imagine the shock. You go from full confidence to like 0 within 2 seconds. Then they're the ones retreating. They didn't have an exit plan figured out. They're looking to go forward. Israelites are like, whoa, we're not going this way. We're going this way now. Full shift of thought in combat. So David wanted to make sure that he was dead. Friends, the parallel in this story, really Goliath in so many ways represents sin. The sin in our lives. And so often we try to dabble with that sin, or we just say, hey, we're going to meet with an accountability partner. We're just going to both share that we both struggled this last week, and hopefully it's better next week and move on. But there's this idea in this of, no, we need to actually move forward with the sin in our life, address it face on, and kill the sin in our life. And this is what David did. He went forward. He's focusing on killing this enemy. It's the same for us today. So with the things you struggle with, are you still dabbling and entertaining those things? Are you focused on killing the sin in your life? That's what we can learn from the story out of the millions of things that are going on. Romans chapter 8, the Apostle Paul says this in the New Testament. In verse 13, for if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if you live by the Spirit, you put to death the deeds of the body, and you will live. So you could summarize this in a way. You could say, if you don't kill the sin in your life, it will kill you. I've met so many people like, oh, I don't want to be a Christian because there are all these rules we have to live by and all this stuff. I'm like, if you look at God's heart through a Christian lens, the Spirit-driven lens, these commands and the obedience that God calls us to, a lot of it is for our own good. He's trying to prevent things from happening in our life. And yet so many people dabble with that sin, and oftentimes physically it destroys them. And so that's what I think we can glean a little bit from this idea too of Goliath is, okay, kill it, make sure it's dead. Police are trained to shoot to kill. Some people are like, oh, just shoot him in the toe. Couldn't you call a therapist like with the shooter yesterday? Why do the snipers have to do a headshot? Just shoot him in the calf muscle. We can call a social worker to talk about a ceiling. No, you shoot to kill to end the threat. That's how they're trained to save lives because you don't know the intentions. So David gets his own sword and cuts off his head. It's a sealed deal in this moment. You don't come back from that when your head is detached from your body, just FYI this morning. It's game over. So David wants to make sure this is locked and loaded. And later, David, as we know, he wrote most of the Psalms we have in the book of Psalms. Beautiful. Some of them are painstaking, just as crying out to God. And so fast forward in his life, in Psalm 57, he says this, they have prepared a net for my steps. My soul is bowed down. They have dug a pit before me, and to the midst of it, they themselves have fallen. So often it's beautiful to see God using the devil's weapons against him. So using those weapons that were used against God and saying, I'm going to flip this around. This is actually be against the enemy. This is against Satan. His own weapon. David taking the sword of Goliath. So then now the men of Israel and Judah, they rose with a shout. If you can imagine the scream, Nearby restaurants have no dishes at this point, screaming, tearing their shirts. That is insane. The most testosterone-driven Holy Spirit moment ever just happened in this valley. Rushing forward, they rose with a shout and they pursued the Philistines. Oh, what a moment! As far as Gath and the gates of Ekron, so that the wounded Philistines fell on the way from Shakharim as far as Gath and Ekron. So shouting in this insane moment, losing their minds running. Look what David did. I guarantee in this moment, if David heard that, maybe they're going by trying to give him some fist bumps as they run by, just screaming as they go by the body, trying to probably do a selfie as they're going up the other hill real quick. This is insane. But I know the heart of David. This is just a Markism this morning. Don't quote me on this. But I imagine this moment, David does not want any fist bumps. Doesn't want any applause. No high fives, no accolades. This was the power of God in me, is what won this battle. Because God was on his side. God was with him. So now the chase is on. And the people came back from Israel from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camp. Way to go, boys. And David took the head of the Philistine. Gets a little extra morbid here for you, Andrew, this morning. And David took the head of the Philistine, and he brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. So this gets a little bit extra morbid just because it's the Bible. We like to address it. So this actually went on for a long time, where David had the head of Goliath. So some of you are hunters maybe in your house, or you grew up with a grandfather or someone in your house that taxidermied the game that they had, and they put it on the walls of the house. Here's this elk that I got. Here's this rattlesnake. I have no idea. Here's an armadillo you shot with your .22. Whatever you would have these things on the wall. And here I just think that David has this moment. He has this, you could call it a souvenir in a way, taking this thing around to show the victory that God had in his life. A visible image, as disgusting as it was. So we don't know if he pickled it, somehow he preserved it in a way to take this thing around. Imagine all the juices. I don't know what kind of jar. They had to make a custom jar for this massive head. They did embalm it. I don't know what they did. It's gross, but it's a visible reminder of what God did for Israelites and also for David specifically. A visible reminder. So he took it around, and Jerusalem was not conquered until many years later. And so he brought this head to Jerusalem. And so we don't know the details behind this, but he had this souvenir. And the rest of the story gets a little odd if you've looked ahead. Verse 55 is really interesting. As soon as Saul saw David go out against the Philistines, so Saul, who knew David, right? There's a relationship there. He said to Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this youth? Whose son is this youth? And Abner said, as your soul lives, O king, I do not know. And the king said, inquire whose son the boy is. And as soon as David returned from the striking down of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son are you, young man? Whose son are you, young man? And David answered, I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. So there's a lot of ideas of what is going on with Saul. Why does he not know him? Did time elapse and go by here? Was he unrecognizable? Or was he just trying to know who his father was? Or is it because he knew he promised his daughter to whoever is victorious to get the giant, so he wants to know his son-in-law and who he's kind of getting married into in a different way? So there's all these different ideas about why is he asking all these things, but also I'm reminded that Saul had some mental issues. There was some torment going on there. So for whatever the case, he's asking all these questions about who his father is, Jesse, and we're not so exactly sure of why he's asking these questions, but I want to bring us back to the main point of the story. As I ask myself a question in the own text, is how do we get here? And when you're here, sometimes it's good to zoom out or to rewind and go back and see how we got here. This entire story amplifies and shows the power of God. But it really shows that David had a personal relationship with his God. I think Saul saw more of God as a theory. And you look at the life of David, and if you know the rest of his life, there were some bumps in his life. We don't follow everything in the life of David. A lot of things were just a description of what he did, not a prescription for us today. A lot of sin in his life later on. A lot of things he stumbled in and he did that were horrible. But looking at him now in his youth, looking at this is just showing him the image of this was personal to him. You said something bad against my God. Don't defy the name of God. Don't mess with the God of Israel. And even when we talked about this last week, he wanted to make sure the whole assembly knew of the God he believed in, he worshiped. He knew that there were Israelites that didn't even believe in this God. So in his heart, he wanted the whole world to know this personal relationship that he had with God. And all these Psalms are just the outcrying of his heart, the pain, the anguish, the joy, everything in between. It's from a guy who had a personal relationship with his God. And so that's why I think he sees victory. This is personal for him. He wanted to go. Most Israelites did not want to go. They did not want to move forward. And so in the Bible, we have so many stories of people who walked with God. And we have so many great examples for us today. I know, yes, we should look at Christian leaders today. There's maybe someone on your left this morning, someone on your right who you have great respect for in their Christian walk, or someone that you know currently, maybe someone you don't know, but you just know of them through media in the Christian faith. But it's so good to go back into the Bible and see all these broken souls that God used. But God got to walk with them. They got to walk with God. I think all the way back into the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. And God walked with them in the garden. There was a relationship there. And look at the life of Moses. Moses, who was called by God to lead out the Israelites from captivity, massive responsibility, didn't want to be the voice. Dude, have my brother do the talking, all this like insecurity. But in this one amazing story I love in Exodus chapter 33, it talks about how Moses was walking with God. And this is a crazy story, and I want this in my life more and more as I want to get closer to God. But it says this in Exodus chapter 33. It's not going to be on the screen. I'll just read it for you this morning. It says, whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people would rise up, and each would stand at his tent door and watch Moses until he had gone into the tent. When Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and would stand at the entrance of the tent, and the Lord would speak with Moses. Let me say that again. And the Lord would speak with Moses. When Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would do this. I already said that. And when all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise up and worship, each at his tent door. Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face with a holy God. Friends, I don't even know. Maybe I should pray for that. It kind of terrifies me the more I learn about God and the reverence and respect I have for him and his holiness. I don't know if I want to be face to face with him. So Moses had this opportunity, speaking with him face to face, with God, creator, the one who made him, having this conversation. They spoke face to face as a man speaks to his friend. Then you see the relational side, the loving side of God. Holiness and reverence, fire, holy fire, and then relationship and love and grace. All making up who this God is, the God of the Bible. When Moses turned again into the camp, his assistant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. That's just Moses. Think about the Apostle Paul. Back when he was Saul, this encounter with Jesus convicted him. He was blinded for 3 days. And walking with Jesus in that moment of having this born-again moment of starting over. Think about Peter in the New Testament, walking with Jesus. And Peter was a challenge. And Jesus in his patience walked with Peter. Friends, the invitation is still there for you today. Now, I know it's different, right? Part of me still desires, in some ways, to have this physical image of Jesus and to have that physical hug, that embrace that would mean so much to me. So it takes an extra element of faith for us today, for those who are not walking physically with Jesus. But to spend time in his word, with his words, you get to see the heart of God. It's walking with him. When you talk to him in the Spirit, you have those moments of where you are with God, walking with him. But friends, the main point of this entire series is not really David. David was just a shadow of someone to come in the New Testament. There are so many similarities between David and his anointing, David as shepherd, as king, to someone who came in the New Testament. You can probably guess who this is. His name is Jesus. I want to show you a chart here that has some comparisons between David and also with Jesus. Both born in Bethlehem. Shepherd at an early age. Jesus, the good shepherd. Performed priestly sacrifices. Jesus was, as we know him, as the high priest. The king of Israel, the earthly kingdom. Jesus, the king of the world, the spiritual kingdom. David, succeeded by wisdom, Solomon his son. Jesus sent us the Holy Spirit, gives us the gift of wisdom. David started kingship at age 30. Jesus started his ministry at age 30. And there are many more parallels as well, friends. So this is just a shadow to show us the future king who was coming. They had the final anointing, and that was Jesus Christ. And his victory over sin as he faced the enemy head on. As he could have, as he's sweating in the garden the night before, said, you know what? Father, I don't want to go forward in this. People are stinky. I just spent many years with the most disobedient, awkward youth group. Are they worth it? Are you worth it? And Jesus the next day said, you know what? In full obedience, I'm going to go forward all the way to the cross. I'm going to face sin face to face, take it head on, and let my body be the one who takes it. Why? Because he loves you and because he loves me and he wants to be obedient to the Father. And so in that very moment of victory, as Jesus looked at sin, all the sin of past and present and future, all the burden in the cosmos that went on him on that cross was done out of a love that I can never fully explain. There are no words that describe it in detail. But it's an image of love, of sincere love for all of you. And his hope is that you just step forward in faith with him, moving forward. You step forward in faith and say, Jesus, I maybe don't have all the answers, but I'm going to step forward in faith and believe in your grace and your free gift of salvation. I'm going to turn from these sins. I'm going to fight these sins with you and turn and face him. That's God's desire for you, to have that relationship, is for you to seek him and have a personal relationship with him. That is his goal, friends. So friends, we will give you a chance next week to make this even more personal. We have a prayer and worship service here. We're just going to go to battle. We want to pray for you. Prayer stations, you get a chance to pray with the people on their left and right. Allow us to pray for you. You can come here and pray for your family members. You can bring your neighbors who have never been prayed over. We give you a chance next week to make this even more personal in your life. I'm going to read you a quote. I think we have this on the screen as well. It's from an author, a pastor, Jim Cymbala. He said this. I read this last week during our reading party. Nerds, I know, at our house on Sunday. But this quote just hit me in the chest when I read this last week in this book called Fresh Wind, Fresh Fire I'm going through again. He said this: what does it say about our churches today that God birthed the church in a prayer meeting? And prayer meetings today are almost extinct. What does that say about the church? Friends, I'm not trying to pressure you or to put some sort of hey, to trying to condemn you. I'm just saying, look at where we're going. Sometimes the ship can just drift and drift and drift, and sometimes we have to fight hard to pull it back. So next week, let's make a dent together and come in full unity before the throne of God and worship through song, through theology in the songs, and to pray and just to talk to him. We want to stretch you and challenge you. So next week, friends, I hope you will be here for that. Well, friends, I just want to pray for you. We will have people at the prayer crosses this morning. If you have a prayer need for anything in your life, there's nothing more than these people would love to do than to pray for you. So please allow them. If you've never stepped forward to have that personal relationship with Jesus, I'll be in the back of the room if you want to come talk with me. I would love to pray for you as well. And our prayer team members would love to pray for you for salvation as well. But friends, I just want to pray for us. I also want to just pray for continued unity in our church, but also in our nation. So let me just pray. Well, King Jesus, we come before you, God. We come before you just broken in so many different ways because our nation is continually turning away from you. And part of my heart's yes, we are falling apart right on schedule. It's no surprise to you, God. But Jesus, help us as a church to not play games. Help us to take our faith serious. Jesus, help us to really show the world that we do have a personal relationship with you. We're not just reciting certain things and just wearing the perfect shirts and showing up on Sunday, God, that we really, really do love you and we know you. So God, help us be unified as a church. Help the churches in this area all be unified together as we worship you, the same God. And Jesus, for anyone in the room today who's never had a personal, living, breathing relationship with you, like David, then this is their morning, God. Have your Spirit draw them. Have them see the sin in their life they need to confess this morning, and to fully face it head on and to just absolutely kill it with your help and your power. So Jesus, this morning is for you. And I pray this in your name. Amen.